All right. So I want us to, because it's been 7 weeks and then you had a break, so it's good to kind of just come back and touch base and see where we are. So if you remember, you can see the screen, right?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, great. So if you remember, this is a foundation course, SKBS 1023. This is an undergraduate foundation course, focusing primarily on skills, reading skills, critical reading and analytical reading skills, evaluating literary texts as well as some non-literary texts, right? And you are guided into reading it closely, and what that entails vis-a-vis a literature classroom. Reading it closely would be elements of literature. You're looking at characters, point of view, narrative voice, and even language, and how language helps create a kind of a meaning to the text, right? Specifically using figurative language, not just literal language, right? And through this close reading, you are also guided into using this skill to appreciate, as it says here, appreciate and scrutinize the text from a more modern perspective to understand the role of literature in human society. What this means would be, you may be reading a text, a classical text, like Dong Lai and Xiao Cheng have chosen to do for their assignment. So you may be reading a classical text, but you are reading from your current perspective, given your current worldview, right? So how you embrace the text and how you approach the text and understand the meaning that is being made in the text is also as important as what the writer himself or herself intended when he or she wrote the text. Okay, another example would be if you chose to work on Jane Austen's work, one of my favorite Victorian writers. If you chose to work with her novels, you are not an 18th century or 19th century or even 17th century reader. You're very much a 21st century reader. So there have been, decades and centuries apart between the time she wrote and the intended readers that she had in mind when she wrote it, and you. So how do you approach the reading of the text, right? So you have to understand the context of where the text was situated, but you also must bring in your perspective. And that's where we are today. For today's session, so we've covered, the various topics that we have covered. Introduction to critical appreciation, text and language, text and techniques, text and themes. So today we come to an important dimension of critical appreciation, which is interpretation. So when we talk about interpretation, there is a kind of there are elements of subjectivity, because how Ruby interprets the text compared to how Xiao Cheng interprets the same text compared to how Shah interprets the text, as well as how Dong Lai interprets the text, and of course how I would read the text would be different, right? So reader has a kind of a huge role in this art of meaning making. So when we talk about pathways to meaning, of course we need language. We need the common language in order to create meaning. So whatever the words the writer uses, he or she has to use words that we understand, and the words must mean something both for him and for us. It's not the same like when you're reading Tolkien and he came up with his own language, the elves' language. He developed a whole new language, right? That's different. But in Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings, I mean. So here, when we talk about meaning making, when the writer uses a particular imagery, you and I understand because we can imagine the same thing that he or she uses. And that helps, that kind of use of language helps in the pathway towards meaning making, both for the reader reading what's on paper, as well as the writer when he is developing it, when she is developing the text. Okay. So I want to kind of keep that in the back of your mind when you are thinking about interpretation. Because a lot of times students and scholars and researchers will be asking, is this right? Can I read this text from this perspective? Can I interpret this novel from this perspective, right? The writer might not have intended it to be read from the perspective that you chose, but as long as you are able to make the connections in the text, right? The evidence is there, you are able to make connections, and you are using the right kind of tools in the reading of the text, then it's fine. Okay, your response as a reader is justifiable. It might not be what the writer intended, but that's not an issue in this context. Okay, so when I say the right tools, what do I mean? So at the fundamental level, the tools that we need to incorporate in our response, in our critical response of a text, would be the fundamentals, which would be the techniques of storytelling. And these are just some of them: characterization, narrative voice, point of view, conflict. Bear in mind, when the writer is writing the story, he or she is also utilizing these elements, these techniques. So when Mohsin Hamid wrote The Reluctant Fundamentalists, he had a story, i.e. the plot, okay, story. He had a story, he had the plot, what happens first, what happens next, what happens and all, and how will it end. He had the story, but he also had to figure out whose perspective he wanted the story told. He also had to figure out how many characters there will be in the story. He also had to figure out what was the conflict in this story. Is this an external conflict? Is this an internal conflict within the character, right? He also had to figure out whose voice will be used to tell the story. So if you think about it, the writer himself or herself will utilize these techniques of storytelling, right? I.e., using characterization, narrative voice, point of view, and conflict. The writer, the novelist, the prose writer uses these techniques. And we as readers, we are also using these techniques to then dissect the story. So this is one tool that we use. Yeah. Another tool would be to identify issues and themes. Every story must have these elements, right? Narrative voice, conflict, point of view. A story without a conflict, you will read it and you think, so what's the story about? It's nothing. Everybody's living happily ever after, and there is no issue. So there's nothing for you to dissect, for you to kind of appraise, right? For you to do a critical appreciation of. Okay, so it's the conflict that helps lead you into understanding the issue that the writer is trying to introduce to us, the theme that the writer is trying to kind of showcase in this particular text. So we had Wole Soyinka's telephone conversation, and in that poem, you saw how the poet introduces us with a persona who spoke very well, spoke English very well, and yet his speech and the way he represents himself in his speech, in his English speech, does not capture the physicality of his sense of being. His external person is not an Englishman, yet he speaks very much like an Englishman. So he uses the telephone to kind of break that barrier between how people will perceive him and physically, and how people will receive him in terms of his speech, right? So it's the use of that element, and introducing that as a conflict, how the landlady was very receptive towards the persona when he was talking on the phone at the beginning. But the minute he introduced that he was an African, West African, it became the situation changed. There was a kind of shift in the way the landlady saw the persona, i.e., saw based on the conversation, saw in her mind's eye, right? So, what kind of issue and themes were introduced because of that? So you had to explore that when we looked at week 4. And in addition to looking at issues and themes, I introduce you to a new tool, which is looking at both what is clearly evident in the text, but also what is clearly not mentioned or not stated. And this is what Pierre Macherey talks about when he introduced us to the idea of silences. Some stories, most stories, there will be silences. And those silences are what would intrigue a critical reader. Give you a simple example. If you know the story of Sleeping Beauty, where she grows up, and where she was when she was born, and when her parents wanted to introduce the baby to the community, right? They had a party, and they invited all the guests, and the fairies came to kind of send well wishes to the baby, to Aurora, except for this one fairy or witch, Maleficent. She came, she was really angry. She came and she put a curse on the child, and she said when she reaches a certain age, she will prick her finger and die. Right? Now that's the story. But what is the unsaid? Why was Maleficent angry at that point? What made her angry? Why would she put a curse on the baby? What has the baby done to her? Why would she be angry at the parents? Right? Why was she so full of rage? Those aspects were not told in that fairy tale, right? So that's the element of the unsaid. So as a reader, whatever story that you are reading, you have the said, the obvious, right? You have the said, the characterization, narrative voice, point of view, the conflict. And you also have the reading between the lines, trying to decipher the issues and the themes based on your perspective. But something more than that, you also have the unsaid, the silences, the gaps, what the reader wants to know more of, but the writer has not imparted. The writer has left it, from the story, has left it blank, not mentioning it at all from the story. So you as a reader must pick up on this. You must pick up on the element that is not mentioned and ask yourself why. What could cause the writer to ignore this element? What is the writer trying to say? Right? So those are your toolkits. Now, today, I'm going to kind of like break down a component of reader response, various elements of reader response. Reader response, as you know, is a theory in itself, is a reading approach in itself. The next 3 weeks, we will have 3 different reading approaches that we will introduce. Today's reader response. Next week, we're looking at gender criticism. And the final week would be looking at cultural criticism. If you're studying literary theory, you will know there are numerous reading approaches. Yeah. And when you go to the postgraduate level, inshallah, when you do your PhD, when you do your postgraduate thesis, you get to develop your own conceptual framework based on different theories available, relevant theories that are available. So you get to construct your own lens, or you get to develop your own reading tool. Now, okay, that will be at the PhD level. So the idea is, as a reader, you get to construct the way you interpret this text. But the construction must be objective. You can't just haphazardly choose this lens and then that tool and then this concept and then put it all together like a circus. It can't work like that, right? So there is a kind of guideline when you approach developing a tool, yeah, that would entail certain fundamentals. But we'll go into that at another point. But for today's session, suffice to say, we are looking at Daniel Quinn's Ishmael. We're only looking at the first chapter, pages 1 to 29. I hope you've had a chance to read through it. And you get a chance to conduct a reader response analysis on that chapter. Yeah. So I'm going to stop there just to allow you some time to digest what I have said. I've said quite a bit. Any questions? Any questions? Everyone okay?
Something I'm curious about,
Please.
Doctor. I feel like in every theory that I apply, I will be responding as a reader.
Yep.
I understand that you said reader response is a theory in itself. But then when I'm trying to include like other theories, say, because now I'm very interested in nationhood, for example. So I can also apply reader response and like just gel them together, so to speak. Yeah.
Good question. We have to keep in mind that these theories were developed in the early to mid 20th century. Yeah. So what was happening before that? What was happening in the 19th century, for instance, and how was literature being read in the 19th century or even before that? So every theory, if we kind of put it on a timeline, every theory is a kind of a response to the theory before, meaning reader response came about as a response to the way reading was being done before that. Okay, I'll give you an example. So before that, one of the earliest theories, if you like, was formalism or new criticism, where if you had a text, it's a copy of the text for me because I have it on my iPad. So anyway, so if you have a text, you read the text for what it was. You did not bring in other information like the author's background, the reader's exposure, culture, or gender. You didn't bring in all those things. So you read the text very much for the content and the form, very much for the literary element that was in the text, right? So that kind of a reading was very limited and limiting, especially when you are not the implied reader, right? So if you read something that was not intended for you, you will have a different response to it. But there wasn't a theory back then that kind of encouraged that voice, the reader's voice. So theories, especially theories from outside the centers, the European centers, began to kind of introduce these ideas, right? Began to kind of challenge the convention of reading back then. The convention meaning how it was back then. Of course, today you look at it and you think, yeah, everyone's approaching it as a reader response. That goes without saying, right? But you're right, well observed. But these theories that came about was a response of, like, for instance, gender. Yeah, reader response was an approach, but people were not focusing on the way the gender characters were being were being portrayed and projected by the writers, and the reader's gender was not taken into consideration in the way he or she read the text. So if you read a play by William Shakespeare, for instance, Macbeth, you read it and you think, okay, the woman comes across the evil witch because she's the one who's, encouraging Macbeth to do this crime, to commit this crime. She planted the seed in him, and the witches did the same. But if you read it as a reader response, you'll just keep it at that level. But if you read it as a gender criticism, you look at it and you can say certain things about the playwright and how he represents the female characters in the story, the witches, the weird sisters or the witches at the beginning, and Lady Macbeth. So these are central female characters in the story, and they come across as evil, or they come across the villain. Even Macbeth is the anti-hero. He doesn't come across, he's a tragic hero. He's not a villain, right? So if you read it from a gendered perspective, you have so much more to say, right? You're not just looking at the tragic hero trope, you are also looking at the way female characters are represented. So that would be a gendered criticism. So then later on, you may also read Macbeth from a cultural criticism perspective. So how does that work? Because Macbeth was one of my favorite plays at college, so I'm a bit of a geek on that. So excuse me. So if you read the play starts off with this kind of like, if you drew a circle, the play comes across as Macbeth is coming from the outskirts of the city. The first people he meets would be the witches, right? They call upon him. I forget the lines now. They call upon him and they tell him the prophecy. He receives the prophecy, a bit bewildered. Now he travels to the center. He comes to the center, the city, basically. So where were the witches located? They were located on the fringes of society. So if you read it from a cultural criticism perspective, the witches are located, they are the marginalized characters, and yet they seem to be the one to have the power to plant these seeds in Macbeth. They don't live in the center with amongst the mainstream folks. They're very much the marginalized. So you may use a cultural criticism lens to read Macbeth. So suddenly you have three different readings, right? You can use the play to read it from a mythological perspective. You can look, how he's a tragic hero. What's a hero? The hero's trope, and how Macbeth as a hero is being used as his sense of the his position as the hero is, Shakespeare kind of breaks that trope by introducing a more tragic hero. He goes away, he comes back, not in a form of a more refined character, but he comes back to fall from grace. Right? That would be one reading. A second reading would be if you want to look at it from a gendered perspective. So you're not looking at Macbeth or Macduff, you're looking at Lady Macbeth, you're looking at the witches, to see how the female characters are portrayed. And then the third reading would be cultural perspective. You want to see the different cultures that are being presented in this play. You have the court culture, then you have the cultures of the fringes, those who are on the fringe. Who are they? The weird sisters or the witches, right? So again, the way you approach the reading will also tell you which characters you want to focus on. So the first reading, I focus on the main character, Macbeth. The second reading, I focus on the female characters, Lady Macbeth, as well as the witches. And the third reading, I focus only on the witches, and maybe witches and the court, right? King Duncan, maybe even Macbeth himself, his high-ranking officer. So you want to kind of juxtapose those in the fringes, the language that Shakespeare presents them with, the kind of language they use. They talk in tongues. The witches talk in tongues. They don't talk like everyday folk, and everything they say is almost, it's poisoned with curses. So you have to mind yourself when you're talking to them. You have to watch your tongue, right? Because they might put a curse on you. So those on the fringes. So there's a politics associated with where they are located. So again, if you think about it, you can look at our society from that same perspective. Those in the center have more power. Yet the way Macbeth presents the witches, they live on the fringe. They don't get to. They live in the fringe, in the shadows, in the darkness, right? They don't live in the center where the court is, where all the merriment is. Yet they seem to have the power to change the course or the destiny of a person,
So
right?
is it accurate if I say that the theory opens up engagement with non-literary theories, because we can bring in social theories or sociological, political, like
Right.
cultural.
Yeah. So good question, because the thing is, these theories are not literary theories. These are theories set in different disciplines. Like gender criticism was not a theory developed specifically for the reading of fiction. It was used to study sociological development, society, how men and women function in society, right? But literary critiques appropriate these concepts and bring it into the discipline of literature. The same with cultural criticism. They were not developed to help us read stories. They were developed to study society, right? And how society functions. So anthropology, sociologists develop those theories, but we use them, we appropriate them in our context. Yeah. So in that sense, if you think about it, reader response has gone to another level. It's no longer just using theories within reader response, but as a reader, that's why I say when you reach, even at the master's level, you can do your thesis, developing a conceptual framework. You can, but it's not necessary. But at the PhD level, at a doctorate level, you have to engage by developing your own conceptual framework, bringing in theories from different backgrounds, relevant, and trying to kind of bringing it together, right? Trying to create your own framework. There, you get a chance to play around with these concepts and say, okay, I want to read this corpus, but I can't find a theory that helps me read it well. Because of that, I'm going to construct my own conception. It's like saying I'm going to create my own glasses because I can't see clearly using this. I'm going to create my own glasses. It's something like that. So it's actually a fun that is the part in the research that I enjoy the most. Not the analysis, because I feel like in my mind I've already figured out what I want to say about the analysis, but the conceptual framework. Oh, because you get to do your own stuff, something original. You get to bring something together. I did that for my PhD, conceptual framework. I developed my own on multicultural identity. And every PhD student I've had since, I've had about 11 so far, I would say about 90% of them developed their own. I kind of encourage them. We develop something unique for different focuses. So that's the fun part. So when you come to reading a text, interpreting a text, you may start from two different perspectives. One would be you read a text and you say, in my heart, this is what I think this text is about. I can't tell for sure, but I feel like this is what the story is about. It's about empathy. It's about, you might take a different perspective from what other people are saying about the story, right? Then you have to ask yourself, how do I prove it? And that's where the lens comes in. You have to develop a framework, or you have to find a framework, a suitable framework to read the text. So back to Macbeth. So if I say Macbeth is about cultural criticism against the mainstream society, Shakespeare is giving a cultural criticism against me. I'm just talking off the cuff right now because I've not thought this through. Right? Imagine if that's what I want to say, if that's my thesis, so I have to find the right framework to read that. And I have to also identify which characters will I examine in order to prove that thesis. I'm not going to examine Macbeth and Lady Macbeth because they are both mainstream society, right? So I have to choose the right kind of characters to analyze in order to prove that thesis. So it's really fun when you approach it from that perspective because you have something to say and you just have to kind of approach it in a scientific, objective way. Develop a framework or look at how others have studied the same kind of thesis in a different corpus. Use that framework and bring it to your study. You can do that. At the master's level, you can do that. Meaning you apply someone else's framework to a different corpus, a corpus that you are interested in, that still warrants as a research at the master's level. The PhD level, you need to kind of at least give something new back to the body of knowledge. Okay, I'm kind of going off the cuff. Sorry, but that was a good question. So I really felt that because I think I have a feeling most of you in the master's program, you're just using the master's program like a stepping stone to go to the next level, and you have to start preparing in your mind what is that next level, right? Either as a researcher, a faculty member, a researcher, or even as a doctoral candidate, right? So you have to start thinking in your mind as if you are a doctoral candidate, a researcher. What are some of the tools you need to have in your mind, right, before you start to approach it? Okay. So any other questions? Zhao Cheng, are you following the conversation? Shah, are you following the conversation all right?
Yes, your
Yes.
the explanation is very nice. That I thought of like, oh, it's just like scientists, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We are social scientists. We are,
Yeah.
yeah, we are humanities.
You see, this is it. But when you speak to colleagues or friends from other discipline, they might look at what you're doing as, oh, you're just talking about stories. Like what, y'all are not doing anything hardcore. You're just talking about stories. But the minute you start to break it down this way, they realize that okay, it's there's a lot more to it when you're interpreting a text. Okay, so can I go straight to the lecture then? Okay.
Yeah.
Please post questions, as I'm giving the lecture. If you've got questions, please post the questions in the chat and I will come back to it.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. So as I say, we were looking at text and interpretation, specifically focusing on reader response. We're not week 10, are we? What week are we now?
8, I
Week
guess.
8.
Is it 8 or 9? Is it 8?
8.
8. What's wrong with me?
That's the question I ask myself every day.
Okay.
I
So
know,
we
right?
are week 8, not week 10. Sorry. Okay. All right. So we've covered, like I said, these parts are we've covered this. So this is covered. All right. The reader, you and I. Okay. So think about it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of us in the classroom today. We are all called the reader, and yet we all have something unique in terms of our background, our culture, our the way we were raised, the kind of things we've read, the kind of things we see and observe of our life, right? The way we live our life as well. So even this idea of the reader, which sounds homogeneous, sounds like a one thing, it's actually very diverse. Yeah, so we have to keep that also as we approach this reader response theory. So, importance of the reader to the text. So, first thing to consider is that the reader plays an important role in meaning making. That goes without saying, right? If you, the reader, did not exist, if you did not read a text, the text is dead. Think about that. If nobody read these sonnets, the sonnets will be considered dead. Yeah. So I'm sure you're familiar with Sonnet 18. If you're not, can we just take a few minutes to read through it? Can I get one of you to read it for me?
I'll do it.
Yeah, hang on,
Oh
just
my God, I think I read this when I was like 14. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion deemed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou oust. Nor shall death break thou wonders in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as man can breathe and or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
thank you very much. The first line, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Will I, what will I get if I compare this person I have in mind to a summer's day? You have to keep in mind that summer is seen as something glorious, right? If you read it from the perspective of somebody who's living in the hot, humid climate like Malaysia, a summer's day will not be something glorious. Yeah, so that is a cultural a context that we have to keep in mind. So Xiao Qing and Dong Lai will be able to see that, because if you are currently in a very very cold situation, the winter is really cold, and you need the heater to warm you up, and even then you're still feeling it to your bones, for instance, right? Then the idea of a summer's day is a glorious moment that you look forward to in the year, right? Whereas if you are reading it from a perspective of somebody who is in the equatorial, and your the equator, sorry, and you're constantly in this excessive heat, you're like, really? You want me to compare this person to a summer's day? How's that going to work, right? And yet, the persona says the person that he is thinking of is more lovely and more temperate, because a summer's day is unpredictable. It's got rough winds. Sometimes the summers it's too short, right? Sometimes the sun is too hot, and sometimes the sun's golden complexion dims, right, and declines, and there are lots of things about nature that is unpredictable. That's what the first part of the sonnet captures. The thing that I want to draw your attention to would be the last couplet. As you know, with sonnet, right? um, the first part of the sonnet would be to create the imageries of what the persona is trying to observe or trying to convey. And it is in the last couplet meaning two lines, the last couplet, the core or the theme or the main point of the sonnet is captured. And I want to draw your attention to the last couplet. So long as men can breathe and eyes can see, right? So as long as there's somebody in this world who can see and who can breathe, meaning alive, as long as people are alive, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. What is this that is being referred to?
It's the words, the poem.
The sonnet. So this sonnet will only live as long as men meaning humankind, men can breathe and eyes can see, meaning men can breathe, meaning they breathe, and when they breathe, what is the unsaid? They will have certain needs, and the needs would be to kind of appreciate beauty and appreciate art, and eyes can see. that also the unsaid is when eyes can see, they would want to read these lines. And that's when you continue to live. So this person that is being described in this sonnet will continue to live. But the unsaid in this couplet is the reader. Who is doing the reading? Who is giving life to the persona's beloved? Who is giving life to the beloved? It's the reader, not the sonnet. It's still the reader. So my position is that this sonnet captures the importance of the reader and how the reader continues to revive the beauty of this person that is being glorified in this sonnet. Somebody else, can someone else read this? Just a second. Can I get you to read this?
Yes, can. Can you hear me?
Yes. So this is sonnet 55.
Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes.
Oh, I can't hear very well. Is it me, or is Shah's volume a little bit?
Yeah, the volume is a bit.
Okay.
Are you
now
using
okay?
your? I think it's your earphone. I'm not sure.
Okay, wait. Okay, now it's better,
Fantastic.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, but you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone, besmeared with sluttish time, when wasteful war shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry. Nor Mars his word, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory, gainst death and all oblivious enmity. Shall you pace forth, your praise shall still find room, even in the eyes of all posterity, that wear this world out to the ending doom, so till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes.
Thank you very much. Same thing is being captured in this sonnet as well. The person who the persona is adoring will continue to be in the minds of the readers. You live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. And lovers meaning readers who appreciate, readers who are able to appreciate the beauty and the romance and the ideas that are being captured. You will be able to live in their eyes. So the persona is glorifying both the beloved, but it's also acknowledging that the readers play an important role, to kind of live, to help revive and ascertain the life of this beloved. And finally, Sonnet 63. Okay, Xiao Cheng, would you like to read this?
Yes.
Please.
Against my love shall be as I am now, with time's angels hand cruise and are one.
Overwhelmed.
When hours have drained his blood and filled his brow with lines and wrinkles, when his young foe has travelled on to ages, sleep night, and all those beauties, while for now he is king, are vanishing or vanish out of sight, stealing away and the treasure of his brain. For such a time do I love fortify against confounding age's cruel knife, that he shall never cut from memory, my sweet love's beauty through my love's life. His beauty shall in these black lines be seen, and they shall live, and he in them still green.
Thank you. So again, the idea of um, the idea that the beloved, his beauty, in these black lines be seen, and they shall live in, and he in them still green. Green meaning he's still alive, because once somebody's dead, they're not described as looking green, right? Green is more the analogy or the imagery of youth and aliveness, right? But the unsaid in these lines, the unsaid in this couplet is very much the reader, the beloved may live in these lines, but if there is no one reading them, the beloved will not be revived, right? They shall not live if they're not read out loud. So that element, I think, is an important aspect of poetry, of reading, literature generally. The active participant of the reader in the art of meaning making. This is something I think we ignore, and I think I want to kind of stress that, especially for this topic on reader response. So the unsaid throughout these three sonnets and throughout the reading of literature is that without readers, the text does not come to life, So now we proceed to reader response theory. Okay, I thought I was being clever with all the butterflies, and it's just a bit of a nuisance. So I'm gonna hide them.
But it's cute.
I know, right? It was so cute. I'm all about making it look pretty, but then it's such a bother. Okay. So yeah, all right. So in contrast to other types of theories, we talked about this a little bit just now when Ruby asked the questions. So previously, when it is text-centered, it is the form of the text, meaning the language, the word choice, the imageries used, the syntax. That focus was primarily reader response. And then following that, you have the author-centered reading strategy, in which background of the author, the biography of the author was used to appreciate the text. That would be biographical approach. But with reader response, the central focus would be on the reader and focuses on the mental processes that readers use in reading and perhaps misreading the text. So what goes on in the mind of the reader when the reader is reading a particular text? That's the focus of a reader response. So if the focus of new criticism is on the text per se, and if the focus on biographical approach is on the author, the focus on reader response will be on the reader. What is going on in the mind of the reader? But like I said, the reader is not a homogeneous one entity. The reader is heterogeneous, diverse. Xiao Cheng's mind and Ruby's mind and Shah's mind and Raihana's mind, we are all different, right? And the way we process things that we read will also be different. So reading approaches move beyond the text to include both the context in which the text exists, as well as the reader of the literature. Yeah. And the reader of literature was in the foreground for many of these inquiries. That means you as a reader suddenly come to the fore, and people are giving us, the reader, more attention, not just the text, but also who are we and how do we respond to a particular text. So I want you to consider this point by Northrop Frye, a literary critique writer. And he says, reading, according to him, is like a picnic to which the author brings the words and the reader the meaning. So it's like, imagine a picnic, and the author brings all the words, and you, the reader, gets to read the words and then put meaning to each words. That's what That's what this idea of reader response is like, right? So what is reader response? In a very summarized manner, the reader is at the center of critical appreciation. The type of reading is called recursive reading. The core of this approach is what, and I quote, what happens in the reader's mind while interpreting the text. So what is the text? It does not exist independently of reader's interpretation. Of course, other criticisms will argue that this is nonsense. What's the role of the reader? The writer has done the work, has published the work. The reader is not important. But reader response theory will foreground the reader as an important element to the art of meaning making. So depending on your approach, because if you want to say that, your approach is very much from the reader response theory, the focus will be on what is going on in the reader's mind when the reader is reading this text. Okay, so that's very much hardcore reader response, looking primarily on the way the reader interprets the text. So if you think about it, you have the text, which is the form and the content, and it's the reader bringing in his or her experience, knowledge, observations that help develop the interpretation. And that interpretation is pretty unique and distinctive, right? Because the way you read a particular text compared to the way somebody else reads it will be different because your experiences, knowledge, and observations differ. Your background helps make the reading and the interpretation unique and distinctive. So the concerns of reader response would be, if you can break it down, it would be these: the process of interaction with the text, the response of the actual readers versus intended readers, as well as the historical social conditions in which reading occurs. So back to the example I gave. When you think about Jane Austen's either Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice, who were the intended readers? The intended readers were not 21st century Chinese reader like Xiao Qing and Dong Lai, or 21st century Malaysian readers like Shah and Ruby. The intended readers were specific group of readers, very much within the author's background, but the actual readers are diverse, and it's the response of the actual readers that helps create a unique interpretation. So sometimes in reader response approach, you will position yourself in the interpretation. So you will say, okay, I'm reading from this perspective. I'm a Malay, Muslim, Malaysian, in the 21st century. I'm a Chinese reader from the particular part of China in the 21st century. So your positionality as a reader can also be situated in the essay that you present. That can also be an approach. Another would be the historical and social conditions, right? Imagine if you are reading a text set in a Victorian era, like Austen's novels are, but you come from maybe a capitalist background or a communist background, or various contexts. The way you approach the text will definitely be different. So historical social conditions will also create a different reading to the text compared to how where did I put the it was here, sorry. Compared to how the intended readers will read it, the actual readers will have a very unique response to the text. So then there's a third category of a reader. So you have the implied reader, the actual reader, and the effective reader. So when you go into reader response, there are various categories of readers that the reader response theories have kind of theorized. The third category, so you had implied reader, meaning the reader that the writer had in mind when she was writing the story, when he was writing the story. Meaning, this is the kind of reader who will understand my story. I don't need to tell the reader anything else. The reader will know. Why was Mrs. Bennet, in chapter 1 of Pride and Prejudice, why was Mrs. Bennet so excited when this new gentleman, the couple of new gentlemen came to town, very rich, wealthy gentlemen came to town? Why was she excited? The intended reader will not question because they know exactly why. Because wealthy men were few and far between, and the girls had to find right candidate. The moms and dads had to find right candidate for their daughters. Otherwise, the daughters will not get married, and they will not have anybody to care for them after the father has passed. So the mom was getting very excited. Mrs. Bennet was getting very excited, and she was like going all giddy. Did you know Netherfield Park has been let at last? So did you hear? Somebody has rented this place, and they're very wealthy. And have you gone to say hello to them? And the father's like, why? Why do I want to say hello to these strangers? Don't be silly. Of course, you must say hello to them because he might be interested in one of our girls. And then the father, kind of being idiotic, is like, really? Is that his intention, to come to town to meet one of our girls? So he's just being silly. But in that chapter alone, Austen sets the stage, but the intended readers will be able to grasp what is going on. The implied reader will be able to understand. But the actual reader who is responding, right? The actual reader, you and I reading it, you probably think, why is the mother being so silly? Why is she selling off her daughter like this? Like they don't have any worth, right? But the effective reader does something. Okay, so this is where we want to sharpen our reading approaches. The effective reader does something. The effective reader will familiarize themselves with the conventions and codes of the writing. So as a reader, you don't just read the text and say whatever you want about the text. You still have to read the text within its context, understand the conventions, understand the codes, the cultural elements that Austen was incorporating in her novel. Understand why the mother was behaving in that way, right? So the effective reader, in fact, combines both what the intended reader needs to have with your actual background. You don't push aside who you are as a reader, meaning your culture, your society, your background, your race, your gender. You don't push that aside, but you also need to kind of understand the intended reader that the writer wrote for. That helps make you more effective. And this is also what the reader response theorist Stanley Fish talks about when he says the informed reader. You need to be an informed reader. You need to do a bit more research. What was the background of the writer? What was the writer's social cultural background like, and how did it help inform the reading of this text? How does it help you become more informed in the reading of this text? So my approach, both as a researcher and as a student of literature, is very much to take this position. I use my background, I use my cultural background, my gender background, my experiences, how life has shaped my mind and my philosophy of life. But at the same time, I also try to do a little bit more studying or researching on what was the writer's context and why did the writer write in that way, to help me be more informed. So I encourage us to do that, meaning find out why the writer wrote in a particular way, and then bring in also your perspective in the way you read the text. So that helps, that comes to the ideal reader. if there is such. The ideal reader is, and I quote, extrapolated from the reader's role laid down in the text and often seems a mirror image of the author. He can interpret any work or solve any problem because he knows all potential meanings of a text and all of the quotes of the author. Of course, this is an idealized image, and I'm not too concerned about this because I think all of us, in our respective mechanisms as reader, in bringing in the various mechanisms that we have, all of us have the ability to be the intended readers, and the intended readers would combine who you are today with the information that you can gather about the particular writer. If you have a text that is classical and not much information is available, because of the age that we are living in, the age of the internet, you can always search up. There's a lot of material available. So you need to be more informed in order for you to combine who you are, the actual reader, with who the writer had intended the writing for. Don't be too bothered about the ideal reader. Yeah. And just to kind of bring it all back together, J.K. Rowling, the writer of the Harry Potter series and others, and this is if you look at this quote, you realize that, oh my God, forget about the ideal reader, forget about the intended reader. It doesn't matter, because the writer says, in truth, I never consider the audience for whom I'm writing. I just write what I want to write. So that kind of, it just kills all this argument about the intended reader and the ideal reader and the implied reader, right? So the writer may have this position, but you reading the Harry Potter series, you will have your own interpretation, and that interpretation is informed by your culture, your background, but it is also informed by what you know about Rowling. I'm sure you've read up on how she approached her writing, what inspired her, and how the story came about. These information will also help inform you. So back to this idea of the informed reader. I like that very much, because the information that you gather at this stage may be, maybe quite limited, but later when you come back to it and you've gone through more experiences and you've read a lot more and other stories, and you come back to reading the same story, you will have a different approach or a different interpretation of the text. So the idea of being an informed reader is also a lifelong journey. It's not like you read all the journal articles about the story and then you read the story and then you're fine. It's not like that. So I like this idea of the informed reader because it's a journey. I feel, at least. So just a few things more to kind of strengthen this idea of the intended reader. The intended reader is a reconstruction of the idea of the reader which the author had in mind. Again, we can play around with the various concepts, but it comes back to who the author thought she was writing for and who is actually reading the story, right? So you kind of combine the two. Okay, this is the one that I really want to draw your attention to. Okay, what exactly are we doing? Where's the mouse? What exactly are we doing when we interpret a text? We are conducting a recursive reading, which is reading and this idea of reading to produce new and unique interpretation. So you're not just reading a text to understand what the story is or what is being conveyed to you. you're reading, recursive reading, you're reading in order to create a unique interpretation, right? So in order to create a unique interpretation, you as a reader must make meaning of the text. Not just understand the plot, but also understand the nuances, the unsaids, the silences, the themes, the issues. But in order to do that, one thing that is crucial is this idea of this concept called horizon of expectation. So every reader, so if you have a piece of paper in front of you, or if you've got an iPad, you want to draw, just draw a line, just draw me a line on that. Let's take a break from this unnecessary lecturing. I hate lecturing. Okay, just draw me a line. Take a piece of paper, or if you have an iPad, just draw me a line. Now, if you drew on that line, okay, let's do that together. Okay, where is the share? These are the times when I wish for a face-to-face classroom. Okay, I'm going to share the screen, okay? Where is it? Okay. So let's do that together. I will choose a nice color. I like yellow. Okay. It's not a straight line, is it? Try again. Okay lah, straight-ish. Okay. So, okay, sorry, no. This is the time of birth, and this is, until you leave this world and join the other world. So if you on this line map out key aspects of your life that helps define you, what would you put down? Let's take 5 minutes. Okay, on this line, map out crucial moments of your life that you feel signals or defines you. So I would say, very quickly, I would say becoming a mother. For me, that was like game changer. Person that I was before and the person that I am after becoming a mom, different. Priorities have changed, life goals have changed, perspective of life have changed. It's not just about how I view life and how I experience life. It's also about how my child receives life, how life treats her and how she then responds to life, because I feel that's attached to my sense of identity. So that is an important game changer for me, becoming a mom. So beyond that, there are other things that's happened to me in my youth, in my young adult stage, and so on, that kind of has changed me. Another one would be becoming a teacher, getting my undergraduate qualification, and then joining the faculty and being part of the teaching force, because I am directly able to affect large groups of people, young people's minds, right? So that, to me, that was huge, right? So I would like you to also do the same and chart on these maps. Take 5 minutes, do as detailed as possible. What are certain things that's happened to you in your life that you feel help define your worldview? Okay, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, take 5 minutes to do that. Okay, time to share. Who wants to go first?
Are you drawing on an iPad, Shah? This is look at your fancy device. I have paper and a literal book.
I don't have paper, but I'm writing a bit.
Is it a pen? It comes with a pen, right? The device.
It's the pencil, whatever it's called.
Can you all take a picture and then post it on
Yeah,
the WhatsApp, and then we will share screen from the WhatsApp.
can.
Okay. So, Alice, when you watch this, do the same exercise and try to kind of see how yours differs or is similar to your classmates. Okay. Zhao Ching said, "Great thinking." What? I missed that.
I think that was on J.K. Rowling. I think.
Okay. Okay. All right. So who's shared this? Let's see.
Let me just send the picture.
Oh,
Okay. How many points are you writing, Shah? I think 3 or 4 should be enough. I'm drafting a life mapping.
4.
4 is good. 4 is good. I think I should have about 4 or 5.
okay. So please post yours on our WhatsApp. So let's see. These are the times when I love technology, that I get to do these cool things. Where is it? Can see not?
Yes.
Can. All right. Okay. So Ruby, take it away.
All right. So these are just basically what I can remember now. I feel very bad that I'm not including my family and friends in my in the mapping of my life. But I guess when I was 13 years old, my parents sent me to a religious boarding school. So I knew that I didn't like it because it was a very limiting thing for me. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but I just knew that my instincts didn't really enjoy it. But I survived it, and then I started university. So moving away from home really just changed me. And then when I was 9, but I was in UITM, so it was still a very hegemonic environment. Still, I didn't know why I didn't like it, but I was like, I didn't really enjoy this. And then I joined a feminist NGO, and that really opened up my eyes, lah. Literally, I'm not joking when I say I made some Chinese friends, and then I'm like, wow, I've got Chinese friends and Indian friends and whatnot. So that was when my mind started changing, lah. And then when I was 20, my father passed away. And then I became free for real. Not that I didn't, I loved my father, but if my father was still alive, I'd be a judge by now, or some miserable magistrate in, I don't know, in Kelantan, with a big bungalow and a lot of, yes, like with a big bungalow and a lot of money. But my father, but I worship my father, and I would die for him. So being a judge is like, okay lah, fine. But I broke free after he passed away. So after I finished my law studies, I went to teaching, and I started teaching stories, writing, and whatnot at the learning center, and that really just, I don't know, I went back to what I loved, but I didn't dare pursue lah. And I would say I am changing right now at the age of 30 when I joined this program. This is basically what people call, or what Adele called, the Saturn Return, where at the age of 30, or I think 2 years prior, 2 years after, your life switches. So I'm still progressing and evolving.
Great. Thank you. And it doesn't stop, Ruby. It doesn't stop at 30.
Yes.
I'm happy to. I'm
So
happy
proud
to
of you.
tell you that
Like,
it continues.
it doesn't, like, the Saturn is going to, like, the planets are going to keep on moving, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Oh, you can zoom in a little bit,
Can I?
because I apparently just resize everything to become smaller.
How do I? Can I?
Okay,
This is the
so
biggest. Ah, okay.
yes, okay, so I don't know why. First, because my parents have divorced since I was little, I've been living with my grandparents, I live with my aunties, I live with my uncles, da, 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 da. But after SPM, after meaning 18 lah kan, I went to a college and I finally, even only for a semester, I went to, I don't know, it's just an experience that I think I will remember because it's the first and probably the last of living in a dorm room. It was something that's, opens my eyes, it humbles me, you know, I meet friends and I know, oh, people from Johor are like this, people from this state is like that, not judging in a way, but you can see the resemblance there and why they're always together. So instead of me judging them, it's just a way for me to understand them a little bit better. And then I've always wanted to study overseas, but I don't really have the rezeki yet, I think. So for my internship during my degree days, I went to Yogyakarta. It was just about 1 to 2 months. Yeah, the first few weeks felt like a holiday, because it's just a new place. But after a while, I realized why places, food, accommodation there, they're really cheap, and it's because of a reason that's why they're cheap. The people there, they're really really nice people, and I've always have Yogyakarta in my heart. If you haven't been to Yogyakarta, please go. It's my favorite place. I think I'll go whenever I have the time. And then fast forward, I work for 2 years now. After degree, I finally do what I love to do. I love studying. I love reading. So I'm like, oh, finally I'm doing this. And my grandma especially, um, the after I right after I graduated, she's like, okay, girl, when? When are you studying master? When? I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. And then I found the time, and yeah, but then again, my core, how do I say this? She's like the why I'm doing this in the first place, and then she passed away last semester, right? So that's 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 how I picture my journey so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
I appreciate the candor that you bring to class. I really appreciate it because you really reveal yourself in my class, all of you. So I appreciate that very much. How do I? Can I
I think if you download and then you can open
oops,
it, yeah, you can try and
down,
download. I think so. Yeah,
download?
download.
Hang on, just give me a second. And then, all right, there you go.
Yes.
I'll make it nice. My God, you people, your handwriting so cantik lah, so nice. Mine is just,
No, it looks like touching.
mine is so, Okay, sekejap Trying to kecilkan sikit. How do I move this? Stay, yes. Okay. Xiao Ching is all yours.
Yes.
You want to tell us about your lifeline so far?
Yes. And later.
Sorry? And the letter?
Yes. Later. Not later. Later.
Uh-huh. But can you tell us a little bit about this drawings that you've done?
Yes. There are a few things that have struck me about my career so far. Before entering university, I have been doing very well in my studies, receiving flowers and all kinds of applause. My college life didn't go well because I was not well in the house. But I worked hard to have an ideal second major. I'm also getting a taste of foreign culture now, and I want to imagine later life about me. Maybe I will be a researcher after my postgraduate career, and maybe I'm a teacher, uh, as the same as now. And maybe I will be a worker in the government. Um, and at the same time, I definitely will be a mother, a wife, and a daughter. I don't know if my life will be plain or great or memorable in others' life, but I think I can try my best to uh, define my my life. I think it's just a journal. So when I will die, but it's it can it can be a zero line, but it's it's also another beginning if I can. Yes, it's all.
I like how you are questioning whether or not you will have a great life or a plain life or a memorable life. So I think, I mean, this is not the platform for this kind of a discussion, but I love the fact that this idea is also there. It is not just the kind of things that has impacted you or that helps mold the person that you are today, but there is that element of the foreseeable future. What kind of things are we expecting for ourselves, and how would that shape our life? Do we want it to be plain? Do we want it to be great? Do we want it to be memorable? And the gap in between those words, it's quite symbolic. It's like, what does it require for our life to go from a plain life to a great life? What does it require? What's in the gap in between? And likewise, what's required for it to go from a great to a memorable? What's there? What can you fill in between those two words? So it's very symbolic. Thank you so much for that. So if you look at each of you, if you look at your why is this so big? How do I make it smaller? Why is it so huge? Okay, never mind. If you looked at your own respective line, within reader response, we talk about horizon of expectation. That horizon, that line that you have drawn, is akin to your horizon of expectation. Each of us will have our own experiences mapped up on that horizon. And those experiences are seminal to our sense of identity, to our sense of the world and how we receive the world and how the world is shown itself to us, right? So what that means is that if you are if life experiences have taught you a certain things, those lessons that you have acquired through your life journey will then be used in the way you read a particular story, in the way you interpret a particular conflict in the story that you are reading, right? So that brings us to the text that we are studying this week. First of all, how many of you had the chance to read through the chapter?
Yes,
you
I
get to-
did. Yeah, I read
Okay. So
until.
so very quickly, what were your thoughts?
I thought it was very very wide, if that makes sense, Dr. Rai. I thought it was very New York. No, I'm not sure even if it's in New York, but I know that I imagine big buildings and whatnot because I read Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead. I'm not sure if you ever heard of it, but a lot of American novels started like that, with questions, answering ads and whatnot. So I thought it was very Western in its feel.
Anybody else?
I thought without googling what it is, I thought it's similar to. I thought it's gonna be similar to the Reluctant Fundamentalists because of the narrative voice, right? And then I read. It's like, oh, it's an ad, and then it I don't know why reminded me to telephone conversation because it's an ad and everything. So I don't know if it's this course and the reading materials, but it just jumbles up in my mind. So yeah.
Xiao Qing, did you get to read the story?
Yes, I think it's a wonderful story, but I have many questions about that. So I want to get your sharing.
Great. So this is the teacher. Can you all see the screen I'm sharing? Am I sharing
I
it?
don't think
You're not.
you've shared anything, Doctor.
Just now you shared, but because I was talking, you stopped presenting.
All right. So yeah. So can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the teacher. Imagine this is the first time you're meeting this creature, and you just stare into his eyes. Can you see what I'm sharing right now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this is the creature that sends out an advertisement looking for a student. So our first impression is when you think of a teacher, what comes to mind? Is this what you imagine?
Human
No.
being at least.
A human being
Right.
at least,
Right.
right? A human being at least, right? And then suddenly you are face to face with a creature, not even a human being. Okay, it's a creature. And what kind of a creature is it? Not a cat, not a cute cuddly cat, not a cute cuddly puppy, right? A gorilla. What
It's a
comes to mind? Huge gorilla. What comes
huge.
to mind? I mean, look at this picture itself. This is what this creature, this quote unquote teacher is like. What comes to mind? What are some thoughts that comes to mind? Misgivings, biases, stereotypes that comes to mind when you see this?
You're not going to be able to understand him.
Okay. First
Can
of all, there is a barrier. I won't understand what you're going to say. So how are you going to teach me? What else?
I feel like if you do something wrong, he's gonna attack you right away.
So there is a kind of fear also because of
Yes,
his
fear.
size, because of his demeanor. It's he looks fierce, but right now you're just looking into his eyes. What comes to mind? What else?
the idea that even though he looks scary, but animals are known to be more pure-hearted than humans.
Okay, so that is part of
True.
your horizon of expectation. You, as a reader, you're tapping into that aspect of your background and you're thinking, this is what I think about animals, right? So you may have other aspects about your thoughts of animals that you bring in, and that colors the way you receive him, right? You may look at it and think, "You kidding me? This is a gorilla. They are vicious, they are brutes, they are uncivilized, and they've not been tutored, and they're going to teach me. Forget it." So my misgivings will also color the way I receive this story. Okay, as a reader, I mean, I'm not saying as the protagonist, I'm saying as a reader. Okay, Xiao Qing, you said you had questions. Ask me one of the questions you had.
I think for the picture, the animal, maybe I think it's a man animal. It's looking into your heart, trying to penetrate it. This may have something to do with some sort of reality revealing, but I don't. I think it's unclear for me.
So I get the feeling with Xiao Qing, I get the feeling this is the kind of story you like. This kind of philosophical story that engages different aspects of our humanity and our mind. I get the feeling this is the kind of story that you like. So right now, I'm just kind of like introducing these aspects to allow us an opportunity to say, this is a story about two characters they are meeting. Okay, so in the Reluctant Fundamentalists, it so happened the two characters are human. One is a Pakistani Muslim, another one is an American, a Caucasian, right? So in this story, you get to meet two other characters. Okay, and one character sends out an advertisement, and the advertisement reads, "Teacher seeks pupil, must have an earnest desire to save the world. Apply in person." Imagine I sent out that advertisement in the WhatsApp group, in the MA WhatsApp group. Dr. Raihana sends out this advertisement: "Teacher seeks pupil, must have an earnest desire to save the world. Apply in person." What are your thoughts? What would you think?
I would text Shah personally, and I would say, "What is up?" Because we have a student group, like where we talk about
Dr.
things.
Rai has lost her marbles.
I will be like, "What is going on? Is there an assignment that we don't know?" But we wouldn't respond to you directly because we
Right.
will find that very odd, very,
Very,
very off character. Yeah.
very odd, very off character. What else?
It feels like we need to know something else that's going on in the faculty, but we don't. So because it's like it's so sudden. It
Right.
feels so sudden, yeah.
Right. So what else? Xiao Qing, what did you think when you read that first paragraph and that advertisement?
And if I may add, Doctor,
Maybe my
Yes.
traffic is not strong. I
Ah,
can't hear your sound very clearly.
oh, I see. Okay. No, the question is the advertisement by the advertisement that's in the story in the first page. "Teacher seeks pupil, must have an earnest desire to save the world. Apply in person." What were your thoughts when you read that? Yeah, sharp advertisement. Yeah, I like it's an advertisement in the story. What were your thoughts when you read this? So imagine if I was the one who put out this advertisement and I posted it in the WhatsApp group, in our class WhatsApp group, or in the master's students WhatsApp group. What are some thoughts that will cross your mind? Would you
I think
is this normal?
no. I think it's It's so strange, mm, but it maybe maybe the author want to review something, so he select the see the author select the plot as a beginning.
So the strangeness, the idea of strangeness is played with. This idea of, looking at life and defamiliarizing yourself with what you feel is not strange. He's playing with that idea. So that's something to also think about. As a reader, the writer plays with our thoughts and ideas based on what he thinks people will be able to accept and what people will feel strange. So when I first read it, to me it's like it's cute, it's quaint and interesting. I wasn't very disturbed, but I was more disturbed by the first person narrator and how upset he was with that statement. Second paragraph, an earnest desire to save the world. Oh, I like that. That was rich indeed. An earnest desire to save the world. Yes, that was splendid. He got so upset. He crumpled the paper, he threw it into the rubbish bin. And I was like, such a drama queen, like, what's the idea? I didn't understand why he was so disturbed. So that unsaid intrigued me more than the advertisement. Imagine I put that post out and then Ruby, I'm picking on Ruby, and Ruby is like in a huff. She's upset. She's posting on the Twitter. My lecturer has just lost her marbles, and then she messages somebody back home in Kelantan. I don't know why I did this master's program. This is absurd. I'm wasting my money, and I'll be more intrigued by Ruby's reaction. Do you know what I mean? So I'm intrigued by why the persona, sorry, not the persona, the first person narrator, the I'm more intrigued by why he got so upset. Not so much by that person putting out the advertisement. I'm more intrigued by that person and why, if you read the first paragraph, the first time I read the ad, I choked and cursed and spat and threw the paper to the floor. Since even this didn't seem to be quite enough, I snatched it up, marched into the kitchen, shoved it into the trash. Whilst I was there, I made myself a little breakfast and gave myself some time to cool down. It sounds so comical. The tone to me was so comical. I ate and thought about something else entirely. That's right. Then I dug the paper out of the trash and turned back to the personal section just to see if the damn thing was still there. And just the way I remembered it, it was. My God, such drama. Over what? Over one sentence ad.
I thought he was desperate to find a job or something, so
Right.
he was acting like that.
Right. So the backstory about the narrator was more intriguing to me, at least. Yeah. So for the rest of the class, we've got about half an hour or so. For the rest of the class, I want to hear your response or your interpretation or your questions even. So who wants to go first?
Of the first of what we've read so far, Doctor. Oh, okay. I'll start. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So basically, there are only three words that really bother me. I'm going to be very annoying. Save the world. Oh, the notion of saving the world. So I'm bringing in everything that we have read, all these Marvel movies, this obsession about saving the world, which I note only happens in, like I said, Western cultural products are obsessed with it.
Right.
So that is why even the novel didn't say specifically where it's situated, but I always imagine it's like some skyscraper building in New York, because that is where you save the world.
Right.
Based on what we've seen so far. And then so that really dominated my reading. I was not able to see anything else, and it worsens when the teacher is a captured gorilla from Africa.
Mm.
So I'm like, oh great, now you're looking for enlightenment from the East after you plundered the East.
Oh, okay, okay,
Oh, so
okay.
that was how I read. But the thing is, again, I'm not sure whether I'm reading things correctly or not. Uh,
No, but there isn't a right or a wrong. So
yeah,
that's the beauty of reader response.
yeah. So that was the pattern, and then so when I read it, I get the tone that the narrator is obviously an unhappy person,
Mm.
and he sounded very middle agey, like very like he did something but he wasn't happy, he did something he wasn't happy.
On behalf of all Middle Ages in the world, I can tell you sometimes it does feel like that. You
Yeah.
just feel unsatisfied with life.
I'm so sorry, but I do. I think because I've spent some time with them, so they are still looking for answers. I think after looking for decades, so now they're. That is why he. But the thing is, he also tried to sound very superior. He's like, or I'm just curious. I don't
Mm.
really. I'm not taking the ad seriously, but he was taking the ad seriously. And then he went to the building. And he's like, "Where are the others who want to save the world?" And I went, "Oh." So yes, and then after reading, I think about like what 50 pages, then I dislike that the novel began with the assumption that the world needs to be saved.
Right.
So what is the problem that you're saying the world is having? Obviously, later it gets clearer with all that captivity. But there is this assumption that the world is in decline, and I
Mm.
find that is only a privilege for the advanced country because they've reached the peak. A lot of the countries,
Right.
they're not even like in the like if it is like if it's like a development slope. I'm not sure. A lot of the countries are just trying to make it day by
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah.
that is why I find it a very I mean, of course, it is a very philosophical novel, and I really enjoy reading it. But I know because of my background,
Mm.
if I am just a random, Malay who reads romance novels from Alaf 21, I would not be able to understand what this guy is saying. So that is my take on it. Very odd novel, I must say. I just be very honest with you.
But these are the kind of stories I like to read in my leisure because I just feel like it broadens my horizon. It makes me question and see things very much from a perspective that I would not otherwise. So thank you so much for that. Very candid as usual, but very astute as well. Thank you. Xiao Cheng, can we hear from you? Because you said you had lots of questions. So I want us to kind of probe some of the questions that you have.
My question may be from different cultural background. So,
Mm.
uh, I think I have many questions about that. About the chapter one, I just uh, imagine why the teacher want to seek some students. Uh, how the author want to tell us.
How?
Now,
What do you mean by that? How the author wants to tell us? Meaning?
uh, I just want to say uh, what's the uh, what's the author's intentions. Could you hear me?
Yes. What is the author's intention? So are you able to kind of understand the author's intentions somewhat from the first chapter?
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think is the author's intention?
I don't know. I don't know.
And what other questions did you say you had?
No. Maybe another one is I don't know. I don't know the orangutan. I think it's maybe a symbol, but I don't know what is it.
A Renton?
The gorilla, I think she's
Yes.
trying to say. The teacher maybe represents, being a creature, maybe the teacher represents something else. The symbol of the gorilla, is it, Xiao Chang?
Yes.
Sorry, what was the question? I missed that. That means you are saying you don't know what the gorilla symbolizes?
Yes.
So in the story, you don't know what the writer Daniel Quinn is trying to do by symbolizing an animal to teach a human being about saving the world. It doesn't make sense. Does it? Okay, and how many of you have pets? Have pets at home? Cats.
Oh, I have a dog.
Okay. Do you feel sometimes that your animal pet is able to teach you things about life?
Yes.
Like what? What can your dog teach you about life?
I think maybe uh, maybe it's a kind of a company without any regrets.
Sorry, I missed that part because the line became disrupted. Can you repeat that?
Yes, I want to say maybe it's a kind of a company without any regrets
Okay. So
and patience and uh, loyalty
mm,
and mm, kindness
mm,
and pure love
mm.
without any um,
Conditions.
and yes.
Mm. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot of
Mhm.
lessons you've learned from your pet, from your animal friend, right?
Yes.
So perhaps that's how Daniel Quinn wants to approach this. Yeah, that could be. So what I'm saying to us is maybe Shah and Ruby don't have pets, so maybe they can't tap into that. So we're gonna have to find a different thing in your horizon of expectation that would allow you to be able to get to the story, will allow you to be closer to the intended reader. Right, back to the lecture, if you remember. Uh, right now, we're trying to develop a way, a mechanism for us to become. Am I sharing screen?
Yes,
Okay.
doctor.
Yes.
Uh, where is it? Yeah. For you to become an effective reader, or for you to become an informed reader, one of the things that you would need is to be able to find a point of entrance into the story, right? In order for you to be able to appreciate where the story is coming from or where the writer is approaching the narration from, You as a reader need to actively participate in the art of meaning making. So for Xiaoqing, I would say, because you have a pet, you can understand the value that the animal friend provides you. And you've given us a good list. You know, your animal friend has taught you about kindness, about loyalty. You know, you mentioned a whole list of things. So you can understand why uh, an animal is a very suitable quote unquote teacher for us,
Yes.
right? I agree, because I've only recently been privileged to have an animal friend, a pet, the last couple of years, and I completely agree with you. This idea of unconditional love, right, our loyalty. You know, I was away for 2 days this past weekend for work, and the minute I got back, Nina wanted to sleep with me and just slept next to me on the pillow. My husband was like, "She missed you so much." I was like, "Wow, really?" I mean, I didn't understand that concept before, right? So that I can understand that concept. So what other questions did you have?
No, no, I just want to, in fact, I want to discuss with you because I don't make sure my ideas.
Sorry, I missed that. Did you all get that? Can you
Ah,
can you repeat the line? The line was a little bit disrupted.
Or maybe you can type it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. If you could type it in the chat, that would be great.
okay. I don't know why my traffic is not strong this morning. I can repeat it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I
Go
won't
ahead.
say. Yeah, I won't say. I just uh I'm not sure about my ideas, so I want to discuss with you all.
Okay, give us your ideas.
Um, maybe uh, my ideas is above. So I haven't any questions. Yeah.
Maybe your ideas is above. Sorry, could you repeat that again?
My meaning is I haven't any questions.
Oh, you haven't any questions. Okay, but have you
Yes.
formulated any idea about the story so far?
Uh, for me, I think it's uh, some uh, value about the life.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the writer wants to share us some value about the life.
Hmm.
Yes.
And by using a gorilla to teach us value of life, if you if any of you have seen the movie Tarzan, either the animation, you know, or the real life, with what's his name, I can't remember the actor's name, um, that idea of there is an element of brute amongst gorillas, right? There is the element of viciousness, but do you understand can you appreciate the element of protectiveness and loyalty also that is apparent amongst the gorilla, the tribes, right? And how they work as a group, right?
Yes.
They function as a group. So bringing in a gorilla, you in your mind have to ask yourself, what are some stereotypes that I have about gorillas, and putting gorilla as the central character of the story, telling us, advising us about how to live a better life and how to kind of break away from this mindset of captivity. What does that do to you as a reader? Can you back to what Ruby was saying. Imagine if you're a Eurocentric, a Western-centric reader. How would you view a gorilla? If had been a dog or even a cat, you can still receive that knowledge. But a gorilla, how would that be received? So what is the writer trying to kind of suggest? Not using another human being, right? It could be another human being, maybe in India or in set in China. A very aging monk telling you these stories, teaching you. That's different. But a gorilla doing it challenges certain fundamentals in your mind about what an animal knows compared to what a human being knows. So, what I'm saying to us is when we're approaching this text based on a reader response perception, one of the things you can ask yourself is when you draw that horizon of expectation, ask yourself also, what are some biases I have? What are some misgivings that I have, stereotypes that I have about white people, maybe, or about gorillas or animals like this, telling me stuff, teaching me stuff? That may also tell you how you approach this story and how you receive this story and how you are able to accept it or not be able to accept it. So, the point of this exercise is then to say, you are now being challenged to question some of your misgivings. For you as a reader to be able to use your background, your culture, as Zhao said, her culture helped define who she is. All of us, our religion, our culture. If this was another human being setting out the ad, and that human being says, I'm a teacher looking for a student. I'm in the last stages of my life. I would like to impart some knowledge before I leave this world. It would have been different. The story would have been different, right? But when it's so argumentatively, not argumentative, when it is so controversial, the advertisement taken has this kind of a tone. It comes across as if to say that this teacher knows what it takes to save the world, and it comes across superiority complex in that tone, right? And perhaps that's where Ruby's point is also valid. That idea that the narrator seems to have this kind of a white man's burden, a reverse of a white man's burden mindset, where he feels, I know everything, and this person wants to teach me stuff. So there is that element. But as a reader now, you as a reader, when you approach it, those are the kind of questions you want to ask. So tap into what is available in your background in order for you to be able to connect to the story, right? So that's my suggestion. This is how you approach the text. Shah, we haven't heard from you. What did you think about the story?
At first, because I didn't Google what the story is about, I thought of like, because he ponders, he thinks a lot, he's curious, but in like a manic way, not manic lah, but here and there way.
Yeah.
So I was like, is the author, not author, is he trying to make me ponder as well, like what is he in search of, And then I was like, and then I googled it, and then I was like, oh, it's a philosophical kind of story, and I'm like, that's why I need to ponder a lot. And then there's this part. Wait, oh no, okay. When the man came to him, and the man said, "You are not Goliath." Goliath.
Goliath.
Goliath. And then he turned and marched back the way he'd come, without a look to right or left. And then the starting chapter 4, up until like second or third page of chapter 4, he was pondering like, oh, if I'm not, it's different from if my name is not Goliath, but I am not Goliath. It's going back and forth with the not identity but who
Label.
yeah. So yeah, that's what intrigued me so far in the novel. That okay, maybe I really need to ponder um according to what he ponders, stuff like that. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so the name, he was given the name Goliath, and that's the name that's on his cage. And everybody passes by kept calling him Goliath. Hello, Goliath, 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 because that's the name that's on the cage, right? But as he was listening to this, he starts to pick up the sound, Goliath, Goliath, Goliath. Then he understands that the sound actually represents something. This is talking about the gorilla. But then that one day a man comes and looks at the name and looks at him, said, no, no, you're not Goliath. You're something else, but you're not Goliath. Right? What is that something else? He gives him another name later. What's the name that he gives him? What's the name that he
Ishmael.
gives? Ishmael. Yeah, and hence the name of the book. Right? He gives him another name. So there lies also another aspect that you can kind of dissect. Come back to you. Who gave you your name? Nurul Shahira, Rabiatul Adawiyah, Xiao Cheng. Who gave you your name? And is your name representative of the person that you are? That's something else that you can probe. Okay. Rabiatul Adawiyah. I love that name. I love the Sufi mystic Rabiatul Adawiyah. I remember growing up like intrigued with this woman called Rabiatul Adawiyah, the Sufi mystic. But we now call her Ruby. So Ruby has rebranded herself amongst friends, right? And called herself Ruby. Nurul Shahira, you have rebranded yourself and asked us to call you Shah. So we know you as Shah. My name is Raihana, but at home they know me as Sharifa. My family calls me Sharifa. Long story. Xiao Cheng, you have also told us your English name is Cherish. So there is the name that is given to you, and there is a name that you go by. You want friends to know you by, right? So that element is also something you can tap into your background, meaning you have that same experience of this is my formal name, this is the name that I write on the paper when I have to fill up the form to define myself or to describe myself, to identify myself. But then there is a name that people know me by, name that I choose, that people know me by, right? And that element of being able to identify yourself, the story then breaks that, this idea that this teacher is named, not he gets to name himself, but is named. Again, you get to enter the story from that point of view as well. So as a reader, you get to enter the story and participate in the art of meaning making of the story based on your horizon of expectation, based on your background, based on the experiences that you have gone through, based on the worldview that you have developed this last 20 plus years, 30 years, whatever. And later in life, when you come back and you've gone through more experiences, you read the story with a larger or with a bigger horizon of expectation. You've gone through, like Xiao Cheng was painting us what she hopes for herself. You've become a wife, you become a mom, and you become a teacher. You kind of continue to live, right? Now you read the story, you have a whole different set of interpretations that you can share. Not that the story has changed. What is important to note is that you as a reader have evolved, and that evolution needs to also matter in the art of interpretation. Where other theorists don't bring this up, reader response gives you that space to bring in this element. you know Shah's parents, their marriage didn't last, and how did that affect her? Ruby's father passed away, very much early in her life, and how did that affect her? She said, what are the things that she said about it? And Liu Zhao Cheng's experiences, what college life did to her, and what are some of her aspirations for later. So all those things continue to color you as a reader. Those things matter in the art of meaning making when you are reading a story. So reader response basically allows you the space to bring in you as a reader. Don't ignore that part, right? And in fact, it will color your reading even more if you are able to tap into your background, into your history, into your life journey. Okay? And that's where the unique interpretation will come in. So I just want to conclude today's session by recapping that aspect. That's where reader response kind of allows you this freedom as a reader. So the approach is to see reading of the text as an activity that is different for each reader at each time of her life, right? But what is also crucial is for the reader to realize that when you are interpreting the work, it has to come from the story. The element of interpretation cannot be what you think the story is, but it should also be supported by evidences from the story. But your role as the reader must also be seminal in this reading. So how do men and women read the story? What's the difference? How does the reader become aware of the character in this text based on your perception and based on your life journey? So this is something we need to be mindful of. So back to the text, every text, there is a kind of diversity of reading, and this is something we need to kind of celebrate. No two individuals will read the text in the same way. Because of what? Because of your horizon of expectation, because of the differences that you have gone through in life. The reading of the text will also color that, and the kind of exposures that you have. If you have a pet, how would you approach this story? If you don't have a pet, how would you approach this story? There are limitations to the interpretation. You have to keep in mind that as long as there is evidence in the story to support the interpretation that you are making, you can make those statements. If there is no evidence, you can't make those interpretations, right? Another thing to also bear in mind is, like I said just now, when you're reading the text in your 20s, when you're reading this novel in your 20s, you have a different image of the story. But when you come back to the story, maybe in your 40s or 50s, when you read this story, you will have a different idea because the story speaks to you from a different point of your life, right? So this is an important quote, I think. Rereading a novel as an adult, for example, a novel, especially a novel that changed your life as an adolescent, is often a shocking experience. The book may seem substantially different. Has the book changed? Of course not, right? But you certainly have in the intervening years. You have changed. So your horizon of expectation has evolved. The book hasn't changed. But because of your evolution as a human being, you now see the book and the story and the conflict and all the things that the story captures, you see it differently. So I think that's also a good example of why reader response is an important reading approach. So just a concluding remark. So reader response criticisms explores, this is a quote, how the different individuals or classes of individuals see the same text differently. It emphasizes how religious, cultural, social values affect readings. It also overlaps with gender criticism in exploring how men and women read the same text with different assumptions. I would add to that. It also, informs us of the way you were raised, how you perceive the world, and using this story, how you perceive animals. Do you see them as intelligent? Do you see them as ignorant? Do you see them as, how do you view these other creatures of life? Do you view them on equal footing as us? Can you see your pet animals teaching you things? If you don't have that experience, if I wasn't a mummy cat, for instance, right now, as I am, proud of it too, I wouldn't be able to appreciate this, because I've always seen animals as someone or something that I cannot get in touch with, because I feel like I just don't have what it takes to connect to them, right? I don't know how to appreciate them. So I've always seen them, if you like, from a distance, right? It's not until this last couple of years, when I've had a pet myself, that I'm able to appreciate that the animals truly can speak to you. They can understand you for sure. We now have to spell. When we want to wipe Nina down, we have to say, has Nina been WIPE? Because she understands us. The minute you say wipe, she's like running for her life. She doesn't like to be wiped. So,
She's
some stuff.
clever.
Oh my God, she can spell English. She has good dictionary. She has good diction, so we have to use certain words. But we joke about it, but it's like in your mind, like, can they really understand you? Because when I ask her stuff, she responds, it's like, Nina, do you want to have something to eat? And she'll start to stretch and okay, all right. She'll take her time coming to the kitchen, so she really understands, right? So when you have that level of that, when you have that horizon of expectation, when you have that knowledge, you read the story from a different perspective, right? So the point I'm saying is that we need to also celebrate that uniqueness that our life experience has provided us with. That's where reader response gives you the permission to do that, the permission to bring that aspect of your background, not just your gender, not just your culture, your religion, your social values, and all this, which are all in the public domain, but also your personal upbringing and your personal experiences, and how that colors your life journey, and the way you view people, and the way you view life. I think this is important. So for the task, it's a very simple task that and I'm not asking you to dissect the theme and the issues and the gaps and all that, but I'm basically asking you to decide who you think is the intended reader of this text based on the first chapter. I'm not asking you to finish the entire novel, just the first 29 pages. Who do you think is the intended reader? Right? And why do you think this is the intended reader? Is, like Ruby was saying, maybe it's a Westerner, white person. Who is the intended reader? And identify specific passages of the text to illustrate why you think this is the intended reader. Okay? So that's the task. Do you have any questions for me? Any questions? Sure.
So far, no questions, but I really like today's class. It's like, it's like, I don't know. It's calm.
Mellow. Okay, cool. I'm glad. Thank you. Xiao Ching, any questions? Do you know what
No.
I'm asking you to do?
No.
Okay. So, Ruby?
I just want to say thank you, Doctor, because I think this class helps me market literary theories and non-literary theories, because in other classes, literally, lecturers just throw us theories, pop, pop, pop. So we're
Yeah.
like, okay, okay. But I like that you are teaching us the basics of it that I think I'm very weak in, like techniques, narrative
Same.
voice, and all of that. Because Shah, do you come from a literary background?
Of course
No,
not.
also
That's
right,
why
yes.
I'm
So both of
taking
you
this
coming
class.
from yes. So like and then coming from a legal background, of course, theories fascinate me, but but I'm like, but what about the text or the form itself, lah? So yeah, so I think I'm gonna reread the book and try to consider other people's point of view as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Donglai, also, I hope you will be able to understand the kind of discussions that we've had, and if you've got questions, please do share those questions with us on the WhatsApp. Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. I've enjoyed today's session. Actually, I really look forward to this class because there is no we are not forced to do anything hardcore. It's about the text, and it's about how we interpret the text. It's not necessarily taken from a post-colonial slant, or you've got a comparative dimension to it, or you have to have the nation at the forefront of your mind as you're reading the text. So this class is a lot more about the beauty of literature and how you as a reader can respond to the text from your background, right? And as long as the techniques and the nuances of the literature text is not missed, you can appreciate the text. So I think it is very much on that point that this course was developed, and I'm glad you're finding it of use. And I hope you'll be able to apply some of the things that you picked up from this class in your other master's courses as well. Okay, so please read next week's corpus and have some ideas in mind. We're looking at gender for next week. If you don't have the corpus, let me know in the WhatsApp. I will make sure you've got a copy of it. But other than that, thank you so much for today's session. So I'm going to stop
Thank
recording
you.
now.